Hello and welcome to Written Words and to some more exciting book news. I now have 3 books in my collection. My first book, which came out last year, is a month of writing ideas, a month of writing prompts to get you into a habit of writing every day. Then a few weeks ago, I brought out my poetry collection, Endless Procession. And at the very end of that book, I gave a little nod to the world of translation because much of what I have learnt about writing has come through my work as a translator. And so now I can introduce my third book, Sentimental Tales, which is a collection of my translations. I've just finished going through the proof copy and checking all the little tiny details that need to be tweaked, including making the text on the front cover a little more legible. And now it is ready for release. The book contains a selection of translated stories and a few poems thrown in there too. There are 4 parts in the book, and each part centres around a story by Nikolai Karamzin. Who was Nikolai Karamzin? Nikolai Karamzin lived in Russia in the late 18th, early 19th century, and he is one of the forefathers of Russian literature as we know it today. His writing paved the way for some of the greats of Russian literature that we're very familiar with today. He travelled extensively in Western Europe and he was fluent in English, French and German, which meant he was able to read the literature of those countries as he was travelling around. And he became an ardent follower of the sentimentalist movement in literature, which meant writers such as Laurence Sterne, Voltaire, Rousseau, Solomon Gessner and many others. On his travels he wrote a travel diary which is still widely read today. And on his return to Russia he started to write sentimental tales in the style of the sentimentalist movement. And this helped to introduce a more accessible style of literature to the Russian public, who were becoming increasingly literate. Prior to that, Russian literature was all about either epic poems of great heroes and warriors, or it was religious literature. With the advent of sentimental tales by authors such as Karamzin and a handful of others, stories about ordinary people and their emotions and feelings became increasingly popular. These were stories that people could now identify with. And so reading and literature became much more widespread. So this book contains 4 of Karamzin's sentimental tales, but each story is paired with another story by a different author, either one who had an influence on Karamzin or one who was influenced by Karamzin. So the first story in the book is Eugene and Julia by Karamzin, which is a very sweet little love story. And it's paired with a story called Eugénie and Léonce by Madame de Genlis, who was a very prolific writer of sentimental tales in France at the same time. Part 2 contains possibly Karamzin's most popular story, Poor Lisa, another tale of love but not quite so happy as the previous one, and this one has quite a twist in it. And that is paired with a story by Alexander Pushkin, the station master. Pushkin came after Karamzin and his story is much more sophisticated than Karamzin's, but some of the influences of Karamzin's work are very obvious in the story. Part 3 is based around Karamzin's story Bornholm Island. When he wrote this story, he was starting to shift a little away from the very saccharine sweet romance, and he added a gothic element to this story. And this is paired with an extract from the novel A Hero of Our Time by Mikhail Lermontov, and there are some very obvious echoes of Karamzin in that extract. Then the main story in the final section is A Night of Our Time, which is quite an unusual story, and it's based on an episode from Ovid's Metamorphoses. It's the story of Actaeon and Diana, but with a difference. So there are 8 stories in total, but there is also a sprinkling of poetry. Karamzin also wrote a lot of sentimentalist poetry. And there are 1 or 2 of my own pieces in there as well. I've added a couple of my poems. There are introductions at the beginning of each section to explain why I've chosen the stories I have. And there is also a slightly unorthodox retelling of the story of Actaeon and Diana in the Yorkshire dialect. So to give you a little flavour of the book, here is an extract from my translation of Poor Lisa. 2 years had passed since the death of Lisa's father. The meadows were filled with flowers, and Lisa arrived in Moscow carrying lilies of the valley. In the street, she happened upon a young, well-dressed gentleman of kindly appearance. She showed him the flowers and blushed. "Are you selling these, young lady?" he asked with a smile. "Yes, I am," she replied. "How much would you like for them?" 5 kopecks. "That's too cheap. Here's a rouble." Surprised, Lisa dared to look up at the young man. Then she blushed even more, and looking down at the ground, told him that she couldn't accept a rouble. "Why ever not?" "I do not need more." "Well, I think that beautiful lilies of the valley, hand-picked by a beautiful girl, are worth a rouble. But since you will not take it, here are your 5 kopecks. I would like to always buy your flowers. Pick them only for me." So that passage is where the romance between Lisa and the young gentleman Erast is starting to blossom, but unfortunately 1 or 2 things go wrong along the way. So if you are interested in reading Sentimental Tales, it is now available for purchase on Amazon. And if you would like more information about my books, take a look at writtenwords.uk/books, where you will find details about all 3 of my books. Thank you very much for watching. I look forward to seeing you in the next video, and in the meantime, happy reading and happy writing.